A lot of evangelicals say Mary's not the mother of God, she's just the mother of Jesus. Bro, that's heresy. Hey guys, welcome back to KingdomCraft, where we build churches in Minecraft while talking about Christianity. Today is my last day in the Roman Catholic province of Petria on this Christian Minecraft server. I'm just going to be exploring the final tail end of it while I talk about Mary, which makes sense because I'm in the Catholic province, but I'm not going to be talking about the Catholic views of Mary, I'm going to be talking about the Reformed views of Mary. Because there's a common strawman and stereotype that Protestants have no Mariology, that Protestants think Mary was just a nice lady. She was just, a vessel that God used to give birth to Jesus, but aside from that, she doesn't matter at all. And this is not true, if you read the classical Reformed teaching on this. Generally, Protestants get lumped into one big group, based on nothing. Protestant is just defined as any new thing that starts that's not Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. So people like me, Reformed Christians like me, get lumped in with people like Baptists and non-denominationals. But that would be like, lumping all ecclesialists together. Ecclesialist is like an apostolic denomination that claims to be the one true church. So that'd be like me lumping Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, and Assyrian Church of the East together, and then saying like, oh, these apostolic Christians don't believe Mary's the mother of God because the Assyrian Church of the East doesn't believe Mary's the mother of God. At least they don't historically. And which is true, they were the original Nestorian church. And that's one of the first controversies about Mary. Is she the mother of God or just the mother of Christ? That was what the Council of Ephesus was all about. The Ecumenical Council at Ephesus, the Third Ecumenical Council. Nestorius was a heretic who said Mary is not the mother of God, she's just the mother of Christ. The reason he was considered a heretic is because he was separating the humanity and the divinity of Christ by saying, oh, Mary's not the mother of divine Jesus, she's just the mother of human Jesus. But what St. Cyril of Alexandria, who was like the man who defeated Nestorianism, he said, Jesus' humanity and divinity are united in one person. We talk about Jesus as one person, as one subject, as the Word who assumed human flesh. So that means the words Jesus, Christ, and God are interchangeable when we're referring to the personal names of Jesus, because it's all the same person. So if you can use Jesus in a sentence, you can also swap out the word Jesus with God. So that means we can say Mary is the mother of God because she's the mother of Jesus. It also means we can say God died on the cross because Jesus died on the cross. Now we have to make distinctions, and that's what later scholastics did. They made those distinctions. When we say God died on the cross, we're not saying the divine nature died on the cross, because the divine nature is impassible, it is incapable of suffering. But Jesus died on the cross according to his humanity, so we can say God died on the cross according to his human nature, because Jesus is God. Yes, it can be a bit confusing, but in almost every case, the orthodox, lowercase o orthodox, view of something is a bit more confusing than all the different heretical views, because most heresy starts out as just an attempt to make things more easily understandable, to sort of collapse the infinite mysteries of the faith into our finite human minds. And it's not to say we shouldn't be intellectual. You actually need to be as intellectual as possible to avoid committing these heresies, to avoid trying to oversimplify things. So yeah. Anyway, so the first controversy about Mary is she the Mother of God? Mother of God, or Theotokos, is one of the first Marian dogmas that the Church really clarified. And this is a Marian dogma that Catholics and Reformed Christians, Calvinists, are in 100% agreement on. For all of Reformed history, the Reformed confessions and Reformed scholastics have condemned Nestorianism. They've called Mary the Mother of God. Now, there is this one random letter of Calvin that people cite where he says it's not the most helpful to call Mary the Mother of God, but saying there could be risks with using this title is completely different than saying she's not the Mother of God. And the Reformed tradition, broadly speaking, strongly supports the first four ecumenical councils and says you need to subscribe to it or you are not a Reformed Christian. So, Calvin, every individual has, careless statements you could dig up. I could just dig up individual statements of popes actually saying we do worship Mary. I know that they didn't mean by that what we think they mean by that, so I know we can't, just pull out, quote mine individual quotes like that. They're always saying Protestants shouldn't quote mine, so they also shouldn't quote mine Calvin. But generally speaking, the Reformed tradition has always rejected Nestorianism, has always called Mary the Mother of God, because she is the Mother of God, because Jesus is God. And that's why I say figures like John MacArthur are not Reformed, because he said, not only, he didn't just say it can be unhelpful to call Mary the Mother of God, he said Mary did not give birth to God. God was never born. He said this a while ago. It was like many years ago when he said this, but he has never made any public statement correcting this. And if you are like a world-famous pastor with basically an entire Christian ideology based on your teachings, there are like MacArthurite churches planted all over the world. And if you have study Bibles with your name on it that you distribute at all your MacArthurite churches, I've been to one of them, I went to Steve Lawson's church once, then you should know better. So until John MacArthur makes some sort of public correction to his Nestorianism, I'm going to keep calling him a Nestorian, even though he's made some other statements that don't sound exactly Nestorian. But he should make a correction. He didn't just say, I don't like this term for various reasons. He said Mary is not the Mother of God. So John MacArthur is not Reformed. Traditional Reformed Mariology teaches Mary is the Mother of God. Now there's several other dogmas that are not so clear-cut in Reformed theology. Several other Catholic Marian dogmas about Mary, that we might not affirm, but some people still do affirm. These Marian dogmas are debated within Reformed history. Well, actually, two of them are. One of them really isn't. They are the perpetual virginity of Mary, which says Mary remained a virgin even after Jesus was born. They are the Immaculate Conception of Mary, which means Mary was born without original sin and did not commit any sin. She was completely sinless. And the third is the bodily Assumption of Mary, which says that Mary did not suffer any, human death. Her body was just directly assumed into heaven. So those are the three other Marian dogmas that are not universally accepted amongst Reformed Christians. Now, I'm going to actually speak about them in order of how well accepted they are. The first is the perpetual virginity of Mary. And if you are PCUSA like me and you want to subscribe to all the PCUSA's confessions, you should affirm the perpetual virginity of Mary, because one of the Presbyterian Church USA's confessions does. Now, not all churches use this confession, not all Reformed or Presbyterian churches use this confession, but the PCUSA is one of several Reformed churches that uses the Second Helvetic Confession by Heinrich Bullinger. Heinrich Bullinger was one of the most important Calvinist reformers. He might even get second place to John Calvin in terms of his theological contributions to the Reformed tradition. Heinrich Bullinger had the highest Mariology of any of the reformers. All the reformers had much higher Mariology than modern evangelicals. Basically, all the reformers believed in the perpetual virginity of Mary. Even Zwingli believed in the perpetual virginity of Mary, and he used the typology of Mary as the new Ark of the Covenant to defend her her perpetual virginity. Now, at first, when I heard about this doctrine, it didn't make much sense to me, because I said, even if she was sinless, which I don't believe, then, well, there's nothing wrong with sex after marriage, after Jesus was born, so, I thought the purpose of the virgin birth was so that Jesus would have a miraculous birth, not because there's something important about her being a virgin in and of itself. And I think, honestly, the theological arguments on both sides of the perpetual virginity debate are kind of bad. On the one side, the people against the perpetual virginity will say, their focus is about Joseph. They'll be like, if Mary stayed a virgin her whole life, Joseph would have been really sad, so that means it can't be true. And it just, look, if a woman is the mother of God, there can be exceptions made. There can be exceptions made to her personal life, and it's kind of creepy that they would think that is their first thought that comes to mind, okay? Seriously. But on the other side, the people who are dogmatically for the perpetual virginity, they think there's something defiling about sex in and of itself. And I think that might have to do with some early, some early Stoic or Greek philosophical influences in the early church, because those definitely did exist. So, regarding the perpetual virginity, I affirm it, but not super dogmatically, because Heinrich Bullinger did affirm it. St. Augustine affirmed it. Thomas Aquinas affirmed it. John Wesley affirmed it. Basically, every single person, Catholic, Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, affirmed it until pretty recently. So this is an issue where I'm going to just concede to tradition, even though I don't really see a good theological argument for it. If so many important figures in tradition, like all the reformers, including Zwingli, if they all affirmed it, I don't see a good reason why I should not affirm it. By the way, now I'm leaving the Catholic province. I don't see why I should not affirm it. Because, you know, they probably know more than me. Even if it doesn't make sense to me, it makes sense to them, apparently, so I'm gonna go with it. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be true. Some people say Jesus had other children. That means it's not true. But those could have just as easily been Joseph's children from a previous marriage. Because Joseph was probably very old. That's probably why we don't see much of him after the birth of Jesus, after that story. So all the objections can easily be dismissed. There's one verse that says Mary and Joseph didn't consummate the marriage until after Jesus was born, but I've studied the grammar. Apparently the grammar until doesn't mean they did consummate the marriage afterwards, so I don't know. There's not great arguments for it. There's not great arguments against it. I don't think people should be focusing on that all that much. I don't think it's as important as a lot of Catholics think it is, but I'm just going to go along with it, given how much of the tradition affirmed it, without being dogmatic. I'm not going to excommunicate someone if they didn't affirm it. So next, we get to the bodily assumption of Mary. And I don't know much Reformed commentary on this, but remember I said Heinrich Bullinger had the highest Mariology of any of the Reformers. Okay, I think I'm on someone's private island over here. I guess me leaving the Roman Catholic continent of Petria represents me slowly moving away from Roman Catholic Mariology as we go down the list of Roman Catholic Marian dogmas. So, Heinrich Bullinger had the highest Mariology of all the Reformers, and he did affirm the bodily assumption of Mary. Now, he didn't affirm it in the Second Helvetic Confession of Faith. He didn't affirm it in any of the confessions that he wrote. So it's not binding on any Calvinists whatsoever that he wrote that. That he believed that, because he didn't write it in any of our confessions. But it's still something that some Reformed people have believed. So it's not like there's zero precedent for affirming the bodily assumption of Mary in the Reformed tradition. I think, generally speaking, though, the Reformed tradition has rejected it, just because there's so little evidence for it in the early church. Because, there's even, I forget who it is, Gavin Ortlund has a good video about this. I'll link it in the description if I don't forget, which I probably will. But there's some early church father who, makes a list of all the people in the Bible who were just taken up directly into heaven, which includes, Enoch and Elijah, and Mary is, not on that list. So you'd think if Mary was as important as she is to Catholics, and if her bodily assumption was of some great theological significance, you would think that they would include that. You would think that Mary would be included in the list. Okay, this ice area is actually part of a scene that I used in a Minecraft movie I made on one of my other YouTube channel, my cringe one that you shouldn't try to find, that I had back in middle school and high school. Anyway, but there is a little church over there, a little ice church. That was back before I was obsessed with traditional architecture, so I was willing to make churches like this in the middle of the ice. Yeah, this is just on some glaciers over here in the Far East Ocean. That's the bodily assumption of Mary. To summarize, there is precedent for believing it in the Reformed tradition, but the early church evidence for it is really shaky. It really seems like an accretion. I think Gavin Ortlund has a lot of videos defending that it's not only does he say it's an accretion, he uses it as one of the most obvious examples of accretions within the Roman Catholic Church. So yeah, I'm not sure what I think about that. It wasn't dogmatized until very, very recently even. A lot of times, Catholics will have this belief, and a lot of their earlier theologians won't believe in it, and it's only heresy to not believe in it if you disbelieve in it before it's dogmatized. And a great example of this is the Immaculate Conception, which is what we'll get to next. So the Immaculate Conception isn't the belief that Jesus was conceived without original sin. We do believe that. All Christians believe that. All Christians need to believe that Jesus was conceived without original sin to be Christian. The sinlessness of Christ is a very important Christian doctrine. But this refers to the Immaculate Conception of Mary herself, that she was born without original sin. So, I don't believe there is anyone in the Reformed tradition who affirms this. But there are theologians who have greatly influenced the Reformed tradition who have affirmed this. And the best example I can think of is John Duns Scotus. Now, during the Middle Ages, there were a lot of debates between the various medieval scholastic theologians, and these medieval scholastic theologians were absolutely brilliant. The most important medieval scholastics were Thomas Aquinas and John Duns Scotus, and both of them were massively influential in the Reformed tradition. Both of them believed in predestination. Watch Christian Wagner's videos on these. Yes, Thomas Aquinas and Duns Scotus both believed in double predestination. A lot of Catholics will be like, no, they don't. Double predestination means God actively sends people to hell. That's not what double predestination means. Watch Christian Wagner's videos. Look up Scholastic Answers or Militant Thomists, double predestination. This is Roman Catholic dogma, and it's just due to Jesuit influence that a lot of Catholics think Thomas Aquinas didn't teach double predestination. But anyway, okay, I'm back. I'm at one of the neutral mining lands again. This is my favorite mining land. Okay, but anyway, Thomas Aquinas and Duns Scotus were both very influential in the Reformed tradition. Duns Scotus affirmed the Immaculate Conception, and Thomas Aquinas did not. Thomas Aquinas, one of the most influential Roman Catholic theologians, probably the most influential, did not affirm the Immaculate Conception. And they'll say, oh, it's okay because that was before it was officially dogmatized. Okay? Now, Duns Scotus did affirm it, and his argument for it is decent, I will have to say. It's pretty decent. It goes something like this. It's based on supralapsarianism. Like I said, both Thomas Aquinas and Duns Scotus believed in predestination. But Thomas Aquinas believed in infralapsarian predestination. Scotus believed in supralapsarian predestination. I used to think infralapsarianism was like mean Calvinism, and I used to think infralapsarianism is like nice Calvinism, and supralapsarianism is like mean Calvinism, but turns out that's not true at all. Supralapsarianism is just a much more Christocentric view of predestination. Infralapsarianism teaches that when God elects and predestines people, when God chooses to save some and not others, that choice is considered in light of the fall and in light of human sin. So that means the incarnation of Christ also is considered in light of the fall and in light of human sin. And that means Christ would not have come incarnated into this world if it weren't for human sin. Christ's incarnation is mainly just a remedy to human sin. That's the infralapsarian Thomistic view. But then there's the Scotistic view, which is supralapsarian, which says that when God chose to save some and not save others, that was not in view of human sin. That was just based on his own good pleasure. Now, God choosing to not save some is not the same as God choosing to damn some people. God only damns people based on their own sin, not based on his non-predestination of them. But even so, supralapsarianism teaches that predestination is not in view of sin, is not in view of the fall. It's just based on God's own good pleasure. And what that means is the incarnation of Christ is also not based on the fall. It's not just a remedy for sin. Scotus's view of the incarnation, Scotus's view of supralapsarianism, his version is that the whole world was created for the incarnation of Christ. So Christ still would have come incarnate into this world, even if hypothetically Adam had not sinned. So that's why supralapsarianism is so much more Christocentric. What's the need for this tangent of infralapsarian and supralapsarian predestination? Well, if Christ was first conceived, not just Christ, but the incarnation of Christ, was first conceived in the mind of God without regard to human sin, if the incarnation of Christ is conceived in the mind of God before God conceives of any sin, then Mary must also be conceived in the mind of God without regards to human sin, because the incarnation of Christ necessarily involves Mary. So that's a pretty good argument for Mary being sinless, Mary being conceived without sin. Here's my counter-argument. It's basically every argument for the Immaculate Conception. If you think Mary needs to be conceived without original sin, then you can just apply mathematical induction, then that would apply to Mary's mother and her mother and her mother. Because if you're saying that, like, oh, if the incarnation of Christ is conceived in the mind of God without regards to original sin, then the same has to be with Mary. But then you could say, oh, if Mary needs to be conceived in the mind of God without regards to original sin, then the same is true of Mary's mother. And it goes on and on. So while I do consider myself a Scotist with respect to my view of predestination and metaphysics, I still don't think John Duns Scotus is right about this one. I think even though I generally am more of a Scotist than a Thomist, Thomas Aquinas was right in rejecting the Immaculate Conception of Mary, and the reason I reject the Immaculate Conception is just the Bible makes it very clear, all have sinned. and fallen short of the glory of God. Every human person has sinned. Every single one. Now, Jesus didn't sin, but Jesus is not technically a human person. So, guys, that's about it for this video, and I will make more videos explaining my views of the different denominations, but for now, thank you for watching, and I will see you all later. Bye.